I'm Sam. Welcome to Brickwall Pictures. Today I am running a bracketed single elimination tournament to crown the best science fiction film ever made. You can see the order is shifting every time I tap it. I'm just going to tap it a whole bunch of times. And I'm not going to look at it. I'm going to stop tapping. This is the order for the tournament. However these chips may fall, this is how we're going to evaluate these movies. There are 64 sci-fi movies in this tournament. That maxes out the bracket. There are obviously enough other sci-fi movies out there that I could do a second installment of this and then have the winner of this one go up against the head of the other one. I've done a few other movie bracketed tournaments at this point. Westerns for film noir for the best directors ever made. So check out those videos if you want more like this. And let me know in the comments if there are any specific types or categories you'd like to see me do a tournament for in the future. I will be doing gangster movies, zombie movies, and war movies. Those are on the docket currently. But if you think of anything else, let me know in the comments. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss those. But anyway, we're going to be talking about sci-fi movies here. I want to say up front there are no Star Trek things in here because I haven't gone through Star Trek. I don't know if those would have a shot at making a deep run in the tournament or not. I have no idea. I know a lot of people like Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan in particular. I haven't seen that because I've never seen any Star Trek really. I've seen like a couple episodes of the original series, and it would take me years to get through all of it and get to the movies and all that, so that won't happen anytime soon. But we got a whole bunch of great sci-fi movies here to look through. There are also some like less great sci-fi movies in here. I wanted to make sure that this encompasses just like a sample size of sci-fi movies, not like only the cream of the crop. So some movies might have an easier time than others moving forward. Our first matchup here is Blade Runner 2049 versus Gravity, which might be a tough matchup for some people, except I don't like Gravity all that much. For me, it's an easy pick, Blade Runner 2049. I don't love Gravity. I think it looks visually great, but I don't find a lot of substance there, and I'm someone who, I need a bit more substance in my movies. Looking nice is not enough for me in a movie, solely, if that's the only positive attribute you got going for you. I mean, it sounds good too or whatever, but the story and characters are like non-existent, basically. Blade Runner 2049 moves on easily. Next up, 2001: A Space Odyssey versus The Fifth Element. A little bit of love Fifth Element. I like The Fifth Element well enough, but I'm not crazy about it. I'm not as crazy about 2001: A Space Odyssey as a lot of people are either, but it is the clear winner here for me. Okay, The Fountain versus The Thing. Fountain is an extremely divisive movie. It's a movie where I myself am kind of divided on it. I talked about it in my Darren Aronofsky tier list. I have very mixed feelings on that movie. I feel like it does some things really well and some things like not well at all. Whereas The Thing, I think, is an all-around phenomenal movie. I talked about The Thing in my John Carpenter tier list. Check out my, you'll find a playlist to my tier lists down in the description. Unless I forget, in which case it'll probably be on the end screen or something. You can find it. I have faith in you. Bring next up, Paul versus Possessor. I mean, beyond both starting with the letter P, these movies could not be any more different, really. Paul is the sci-fi comedy with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost and the alien voiced by Seth Rogen, whereas Possessor is the fucked up, violent horror sci-fi directed by Brandon Cronenberg. Possessor is going to take the win here. AKA Possessor Uncut, it is often called. I've never even seen Possessor Cut advertised anywhere, which makes me think Possessor Uncut might be the only version of it out there in circulation, which makes me think, why call it Uncut? I don't know what that's about. Maybe there is a cut version somewhere. Okay, Gattaca versus The Matrix. I mean, it's got to be The Matrix. Come on. There's no contest here. Scanners versus The Hidden. The Hidden is, I would say, a hidden gem. Scanners is much better known. The thing with Scanners is it has that amazing head explosion, and it also has a really great like ending scanner battle, like a psychic fight showdown. That's a lot of fun. The rest of Scanners I don't love. I think it's one of Cronenberg's weaker movies, actually, on a narrative level. And I would go with The Hidden, even though a lot of people don't know The Hidden. It stars Kyle MacLachlan of Twin Peaks fame, Dale Cooper. And it is a real hidden gem that I love and I've talked about on many occasions. I think it's extremely underrated. It's a fun sci-fi action movie about aliens inhabiting human bodies, and the aliens, they love thrills and adrenaline. They love loud rock music. They love driving fast cars. It's a lot of fun, and it feels pretty unique. It also has an excellent car chase, which I showcased in my car chase video essay, which you can check out. Idiocracy versus Snowpiercer. These are very different on face value, but they are both satires, very different satires. One is an openly comedic broad satire, whereas Snowpiercer is a more, I wouldn't say subtle, but it's a more dramatic satire, a bit more like allegorical versus being like on the nose in a comedic way. It's going to be Snowpiercer, moving on. Inception versus 12 Monkeys. I'm not as big a fan of Inception as a lot of people are. I'm also not like a huge fan of 12 Monkeys. I think they're both good. I think they're both good sci-fi. I don't hold either of them in extremely high esteem. I would be surprised if either of them makes it past the subsequent round. I think I already get enough hate from like the Nolan fanboys, but I do think 12 Monkeys is the better movie. I don't think Inception's that great. Anyway, okay, Attack the Block versus Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This is specifically the 70s version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, because I love the 70s version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That one's moving on. Attack the Block is a decent sci-fi comedy from a few years ago. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, that 70s one with, you got Jeff Goldblum, you got Donald Sutherland, it's so great. Prometheus versus Children of Men. I straight up do not like Prometheus. Children of Men's moving on. I talk about it more in my Ridley Scott tier list. I don't like Prometheus, but it's in here because it is a notable sci-fi movie. Okay, Aliens, that's the second one, versus Antiviral. I was hoping Antiviral would at least be able to make it past the first round. If it was going up against like Inception and 12 Monkeys, I probably would pick Antiviral over both of those, but I gotta pick Aliens. Aliens is the classic. Antiviral, though, it's another Brandon Cronenberg, actually. Brandon Cronenberg has only made 2 feature films, and they're both on this bracket. They're both really good, I think. Antiviral, I actually prefer over Possessor, for what that's worth. So it would have won in that matchup too, and in the next round. But I can't beat Aliens. Aliens is gonna go far in this tournament, I think. Okay, Elysium versus Looper. This is Ryan Johnson versus what's his name? The guy who did District 9. Neil Blomkamp is his name. And a lot of people hated Elysium. I liked it more than a lot of people did, but I still didn't love it. I don't love Looper either, but I do think Looper is good. I'm going to give it to Looper. Blade Runner versus Back to the Future. For me, this is easy. Back to the Future. A lot of people go Blade Runner. As I said before, I will rewatch Blade Runner. And I'll definitely rewatch it. If I rewatch Blade Runner and I enjoy it more, and I end up doing a part 2 of the sci-fi tournament, I will include Blade Runner again. I'll say that right now. You can hold me to that. But for right now, it's Back to the Future. And Back to the Future is a great fucking sci-fi comedy anyway. So even if I enjoyed Blade Runner a whole lot more than I did, let's just say it's not close at this current moment. Okay, Alien versus Nope. I mean, come on, it's Alien. No fucking question there. Okay, Guardians of the Galaxy versus Star Wars. This is such a weird mashup because I've been very openly not an MCU fan and not a Star Wars fan, as opposed to a lot of the film critics on YouTube. I go against both of these franchises regularly. With Star Wars, I'm just saying Star Wars. I don't have like all the Star Wars movies on here. This is just Star Wars. So I guess the first one, A New Hope, right? I guess that one, but also kind of like the series as a whole. I don't care about Star Wars. That goes for the new Star Wars movies, the prequels, and the old ones. I don't care, man. I cannot force myself to care about this series. The original 3 are quality films, I guess, sure. Guardians of the Galaxy is maybe the MCU movie that I've enjoyed the most. Star Wars does have a lot of influence going for it. That might be worth moving through one round, because I don't feel very strongly about Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm not a big fan of either of them. I think I'll go Star Wars for the importance factor, but I would be shocked if it went any further in this tournament. Whereas for a lot of people, your average, Collider or whoever, the Scream Junkies or whatever, it would probably be going all the way, but not for me. Okay, and last up on the left half of the first round, we have Annihilation versus Coherence. These two are both underrated. I would say Coherence especially. Coherence is a little indie movie that blew my fucking mind when I watched it. I covered it in one year's Macabre Month of Horror. Even though it isn't strictly a horror movie, it has enough hard science that it gets freaky and a little disturbing a little bit, even though it's not there's no blood and guts and stuff. Coherence is excellent, but so is Annihilation. Annihilation is fucking good. These two could both move further if they were up against less strong contenders, I think. These two are both like dark horse contenders, honestly. I genuinely don't know which one I'm going to pick. I think Coherence has one major thing working against it, and that is that it was made for an extremely low budget, which on the one hand makes it more impressive, but it does mean that the visual presentation of the movie is quite weak. It's shot on like a worse camera than my YouTube video. It's shot on like a cheapo DSLR. Actually, a couple of them. I think it's shot multicam. The acting is mostly good. It's a very improvised movie. The performances aren't 100% great. I wouldn't say all the performances in Annihilation are good. Plus, it has like great like special effects, which do count for something in the sci-fi genre. But it's also got such great sci-fi concepts and sci-fi storytelling. Annihilation also gets disturbing. It's again not like an out-and-out horror movie, but like the scene with the bear is intense. The ending scene is freaky. There's some body horror with the like internal organs moving around. Annihilation is really good. It's honestly one of my favorite movies of the last couple of years that doesn't get talked about as far as like underrated kind of movies go. Annihilation's moving on, but Coherence is really good, underrated, and I recommend checking it out if it's one you're not familiar with. Okay, to the other side of the bracket now. We have Downsizing versus The Stuff. Audible didn't like Downsizing. It got pretty widely panned when it came out, and I didn't really get why. I guess if you're not familiar with Alexander Payne and you go into it expecting like a sci-fi movie, you might be disappointed because it doesn't deliver as a traditional sci-fi movie, but it does feel very much like Alexander Payne's other movies. If you're a fan of, About Schmidt and Nebraska and Election and stuff, I don't know why you wouldn't like Downsizing as well. I feel like it has a similar sense of humor, good performances. I thought the writing was good too. I didn't think it was excellent or anything. The Stuff is a movie that has a brilliant concept, but is pretty much a trashy exploitation movie in execution. The main character is like the most bizarre lead performance I've ever seen, possibly. I think I said in my Letterboxd review, which by the way you can follow me on Letterboxd at Brickwall underscore is my Letterboxd at. In my review for that, I think I said he feels like an alien trying to pretend to be human, but that's not the kind of sci-fi this movie is. He is supposed to just be a regular guy. It's just the actor is a fucking wacko who can't exist in a scene without seeming like he's about to burst out of his skin. It's bizarre. It's highly entertaining. I think Downsizing is better. Moon versus Men in Black. Men in Black's an enjoyable sci-fi comedy. Moon is a really good underrated sci-fi. It was a very promising start to the career of Duncan Jones, who, if you didn't know, is David Bowie's son. David Bowie, who's on my hat right here. Moon is, I think, Duncan Jones' best movie still. Source Code was his next movie. It was pretty good. But then he did the Warcraft movie, which was no good at all. Because I didn't think so. But Moon is quite good. I would pick Moon over Men in Black. It's a really good sci-fi movie, especially for its budget for being an indie movie. Okay, Bill and Ted versus Repo Man. I just put Bill and Ted as kind of like a placeholder for the whole series because I didn't feel like doing them individually. And as I said when I did my Keanu Reeves tier list, but as I said there, I kind of feel the same about all Bill and Ted movies. Like, they're all different, and they each have different strengths and weaknesses, but they all have about the same number and strengths and weaknesses. So I end up liking them about the same, even though they are quite different. Repo Man is a fun cult classic, extremely rough around the edges. I think I'll go Bill and Ted in this first round. Repo Man is a really fun cult classic, though. Okay, Upgrade versus The World's End. Upgrade is a fun, not quite indie, but definitely smaller, like kind of mid-tier sci-fi action movie from Lee Whannell. It's pretty good. I think the action sequences are great, but the actual sci-fi components did let me down a little bit. Not the main sci-fi components, I feel like those were well done, but the sci-fi world building felt a little half-baked to me, whereas that's not really an issue with The World's End. The World's End's going to move on. Terminator versus Interstellar. Interstellar, I want to be clear, because I think I'm developing a reputation as like a Nolan hater. I don't hate Nolan at all. I think he mostly makes really good movies. Interstellar, I think, is pretty good. I think it's quite good, but I don't think it's like one of the best movies ever made. And it always surprises me when it pops up in these lists of the best movies ever made. I think it's a pretty good sci-fi with a little bit of dumbness in there. And I think it has a scope problem where it's placing its focus and emphasis on big spectacle over the characters and the like human storytelling that should be at the heart of it and just isn't. I'm gonna go Terminator, because Terminator is a fucking classic. Okay, Midnight Special versus Scanner Darkly. This one's pretty easy for me. It's a Scanner Darkly. Talked about it in my Richard Linklater tier list. Midnight Special is a pretty good movie. I do think it is probably the weakest of the many collaborations between Michael Shannon and Jeff Nichols. And I like Jeff Nichols as a director, and I love Michael Shannon. He's my favorite living actor. And Midnight Special is pretty good. But I do think the sci-fi element is, it kind of feels a little hamstrung by some of the movie's priorities and also a little bit by its budget. Some of the effects are distracting and don't look great. Some of them look quite good, but not all of them. Okay, Scanner Darkly, though, is great all around. Wonderful animation style, that kind of rotoscope animation style. This is a fucking big one. Two big Arnie movies, too. Predator versus Terminator 2. This is pretty tough, honestly. I think I'm leaning towards Terminator 2, but I reserve the right to change my mind on that. Pretty tough. I think I'm going to go Terminator 2. I think I'm going to stick with that. It is a tough matchup, though. These two are excellent. These are two great action movies, in addition to being two great sci-fi movies. Okay, Dune versus Dredd. I'm using Dune here as the new Dune, the Denis Villeneuve Dune, as opposed to the David Lynch Dune, because that one would lose easily. At the time of recording, and I damn well hope by the time this video comes out, Dune Part 2 is not out yet. So we're just looking at Dune Part 1. Part 2 could change things, possibly. I'm not sure. Probably not, honestly. I think I'm going to go Dredd, though. And this is the Carl Urban Dredd, not to be confused with the Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd. Both of these movies, interestingly, have vastly inferior previous versions of them, previous adaptations of their source material. Okay, Starman versus the Blob. When it comes to the Blob, I'm going with the 80s version of the Blob, because I think that one is really good, whereas the 50s one, I don't think is anything special. I think it's just a pretty standard B movie. Even though I love Steve McQueen, I don't think he makes it a great movie or anything. Starman is really good. I think it's going to go Starman. I was surprised how much I liked it. I love John Carpenter, of course. I talked about this in my John Carpenter tier list. This being one of his departures from the horror genre. Partially, there is still some horror. But the sci-fi stuff works really well, and it's going to move on. RoboCop versus Ex Machina. This is actually a pretty tough one. Two different eras. One is the kind of cheesy, tongue-in-cheek excess and action of Paul Verhoeven, whereas the other one is the thoughtful, hard sci-fi of Alex Garland. I think if we're purely evaluating, like we're talking about the best sci-fi movie, if we were talking about the best overall movie, the answer might be different. If we were talking about my favorite movie, I'd have to think about it longer. If we're talking best sci-fi, best science fiction, I think it goes Ex Machina based on the ideas, based on the ideas and how those ideas are explored. I think we got to go Ex Machina because it takes its sci-fi stuff seriously and is genuinely thought-provoking and insightful, whereas RoboCop is fun and excessive and violent and it's wonderful, but it doesn't have the thought-provoking and insightful qualities to it. Okay, Super 8 versus Jurassic Park. This is Spielberg versus Spielberg inspired. Some people think Super 8 is a Spielberg movie. His name's very prominent on it, but he's a producer on it, whereas J.J. Abrams directed Super 8. I enjoyed Super 8 decently. Jurassic Park is a classic, though. I think there's no competition here. It's Jurassic Park's moving on. Okay, Under the Skin versus Alita Battle Angel. This one is about as lopsided as you can get. It is Under the Skin easily. I'll talk more about that in its next matchup. Okay, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind versus Total Recall. Total Recall, the other Paul Verhoeven entry on this list. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is maybe a bit more of a... what's the best way to describe it? It's less sci-fi forward. It's kind of using a sci-fi component or element to tell a non-sci-fi story, whereas Total Recall is very much a sci-fi movie all the way through. Sci-fi setting on Mars, tons of sci-fi tech everywhere, adapted from a Philip K. Dick story. I'm going to go Total Recall. Though again, the amount of sci-fi is factoring in here, this time in Paul Verhoeven's favor instead of against him. Primers, the little indie film that could, the $7,000 time travel movie, extremely impressive. They Live is John Carpenter again, with the glasses that reveal the aliens that have taken over like politicians and capitalism and whatnot. Brilliant social commentary. They Live is less hard sci-fi. Primer is probably like one of the most like hard sci-fi movies out there. There are like quantum mechanics research papers written about that movie. It's extremely smart and well thought out. I think I'm going to give the edge to Primer here. Whereas They Live kind of feels more like fantasy, action-y. They Live is great though. Okay, Her versus Arrival. Her, very much like Eternal Sunshine, is the sci-fi is less prominent. It's using a futuristic sci-fi world, and I actually really love how it's integrated, how like background it is, but how it shows up in believable and realistic feeling ways. Her is excellent, and the sci-fi component is at the core of the story and driving the entire plot and the characters, both Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson's vocal performance as this AI that he falls in love with. Arrival, however, has bigger sci-fi ideas. It's more in-your-face sci-fi, and it's also a phenomenal movie. Great screenplay. I think Eric Heiserer is the screenwriter, and I want to give him his due, because a lot of why this movie works so well is his brilliant script, but also Denis Villeneuve's phenomenal direction. And Amy Adams is great in the lead role. But all the stuff with the aliens is excellent. Their execution and just their design, the way that language is explored as a concept, beautiful, brilliant. And the time travel component, or the like non-chronological component, I should say, is all fascinating. The way that time is used as a concept, all really good stuff. Arrivals is going to move on here. And last up in the first round of the tournament of this bracket is The Fly versus Equilibrium. Equilibrium is fun. My opinion on that movie like completely flip-flops every time I watch it. I can't decide if the action is fun or if I think it's actually kind of bad. I think I'm gonna go with The Fly on this. The Fly is excellent. David Cronenberg's sci-fi. I wouldn't give Scanners a pass through the first round, but I will give The Fly a pass through the first round here. First matchup of round 2 is Blade Runner 2049 versus 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'm chuckling a little here because I think it's going to make some people mad when I pick Blade Runner 2049, because I think most people would have 2001: A Space Odyssey winning the whole tournament and would expect me to have it win the whole tournament, but I'm not doing that. I am going to pick Blade Runner 2049. I enjoy it more. I think it's a better movie, frankly. I think most people are going to disagree with me on that, and that's fine because, hey, if we agreed on everything, wouldn't that be a little suspicious? 2001: A Space Odyssey, I definitely go against the grain a little bit. I've seen it many, many times, and I don't love it as much as a lot of people do. Okay, The Thing versus Possessor. These are both sci-fi horror mashups. Possessor is fun, but it's The Thing by miles. It's The Thing. Okay, The Matrix versus The Hidden. This is kind of unfair. We're looking at like one of the quintessential sci-fi movies versus a little obscure hidden gem. I'm glad I get to sing the praises of The Hidden again, which I've talked about it a lot actually, and I sneak it into little videos because I love that movie. But The Matrix is the winner there. Okay, Snowpiercer versus 12 Monkeys. Like I said, I'm not too hot on 12 Monkeys, so it's pretty easy Snowpiercer win here. 12 Monkeys had an easy first round. Okay, Invasion of the Body Snatchers versus Children of Men. Children of Men might be a dark horse to go the distance, I'm not sure. And I want to say I have no clue what is going to win this tournament. I don't have like in my mind, oh, the best sci-fi movie is this. I have no idea. I've never thought about this. I've never compared them before. These are just the 64 that I put in this list. I don't have a favorite to win this whole thing. Children of Men might be a dark horse to go the distance, though. It's a phenomenal piece of work. It's going to move on here. Okay, Aliens versus Looper. That's an easy one. Aliens is moving on. Back to the Future versus Alien, the first one. So this is a bit tougher. Tougher than Back to the Future's first round was for me at this point. But I think I am going to go Alien anyway. Alien is another one that might be a favorite to go the distance. If it comes down to Alien versus Children of Men, I'll have to think about it. But so far, those are the two strongest contenders out of this second round. Star Wars versus Annihilation. Like I said, Star Wars, it's not my thing. Annihilation is gonna move on. I love Annihilation. I don't care whatsoever about Star Wars. Okay, next up is Downsizing versus Moon. These are two kind of smaller movies that aren't as beloved. I do like Downsizing more than a lot of people. I think I would still go Moon, though. I wouldn't have expected Moon to make it through 2 rounds. I think it's just kind of how the randomized order shook up. I'd be surprised if it went any further, but it's gonna move through this round here. Bill and Ted versus The World's End. I think I'm gonna go with The World's End. I have some issues with it, as you probably heard in my Edgar Wright tier list. I talked about it. There's some issues with it, but I do still think it's quite good, and I prefer it over Bill and Ted for sure. Terminator versus Scanner Darkly. I like Scanner Darkly a whole lot. Like, for example, Scanner Darkly would beat Moon, for just to, throw that out there for comparison's sake. Terminator's gonna win here, though. Terminator 2 now versus Dredd. It looks like we're gonna have the 2 Terminator movies going head to head. That's gonna be an interesting one in the next round. Starman versus Ex Machina. Pretty easily going Ex Machina here. That one's simple enough. Jurassic Park versus Under the Skin. I don't know if it'll be as much of an upset as with 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I am going Under the Skin. That is maybe my dark horse favorite to go all the way. I adore Under the Skin. It's one of my favorites. I've sung its praises countless times on this channel. Jurassic Park is great, of course, but it's no Under the Skin. Come on. That soundtrack, man. Whew. One of the best movies soundtrack, one of the best movie scores ever composed by Mika Levy, who's a fantastic musician as well, just in general. From the band, previously Mikachu and the Shapes, and now Good, Sad, Happy, Bad, or Good, Bad, Happy, Sad, or Good, Sad, Happy, Bad. Some order of those 4 words. Total Recall versus Primer. Like I said, Primer's got the hard science, whereas Total Recall is more the fun, goofy, don't think about it too much science. Primer is a really inspirational and impressive movie, considering its means. I will say, it does look like a cheap indie film in a lot of ways, whereas Total Recall is a big budget, glossy kind of movie. I'm not someone who needs my movies to be glossy. Some people are. I think I'm going to go Total Recall. Okay, Arrival versus The Fly. This is an interesting one. I think Arrival is more sci-fi focused, whereas The Fly is more horror, specifically body horror focused, but it uses a sci-fi concept to get to that point. The science is definitely part of The Fly, but I think Arrival is going to take it. If I was just picking my favorite, I'd have to think harder on this, and I might go with The Fly. But for best sci-fi movie ever made, I think Arrival takes the edge by that metric. Okay, into the next round now. I think was the quarterfinals. We have Blade Runner 2049 versus The Thing. I think I am going to go The Thing. And I do like Blade Runner 2049 more than Blade Runner, by the way. But I'm going to go with The Thing. The Matrix versus Snowpiercer. The Matrix is obviously the more iconic and influential movie. I like Snowpiercer a whole lot. I think even still I am leaning towards The Matrix for best sci-fi. I think it's got to be The Matrix in this pairing. Children of Men versus Aliens. This is tough. These 2 are juggernauts. As I've said in the past, I prefer the first Alien over Aliens. Aliens is still excellent, though. But I think I'm going to go Children of Men. Children of Men really is one of the best movies of the modern age, as far as just pure quality goes. Children of Men's going to move on. Alien versus Annihilation. I love Annihilation. I adore Annihilation, but it's got to be Alien going on. Moon versus The World's End. This is interesting. The randomized order always kind of does this. There's always a couple movies that make it further than they probably would have otherwise. Moon and World's End would both lose to Annihilation, which just lost to the other one. They would both lose to Aliens, which just lost. But one of these is moving around further than either of those movies. That's how the bracketing works. The World's End is going to move on here, though. Terminator versus Terminator 2. Now, here's the thing. Most people prefer Terminator 2. I don't necessarily prefer Terminator 2. I love the first Terminator. I think it kind of gets a bad rap when it's compared directly to the second one, because I don't think it's some vastly inferior movie or whatever. If we're looking at best sci-fi, 2 probably is. It has more sci-fi ideas and pushes those ideas further than the first movie. So that's probably worthwhile for that component. And it still has all the great action and the, good storytelling and whatnot. The acting is probably a little better, at least in some of the roles. I think I do have to go Terminator 2 here, even though I don't necessarily prefer it by any significant margin over the first movie if we're just looking movie to movie. If we're comparing like action to action, I might even be one of those weirdos who prefers the first Terminator's shootouts when compared to the second Terminator's bigger, more spectacle-y action sequences. Okay, Ex Machina versus Under the Skin. This is a pretty tough pairing. These are two of the best sci-fi movies from the last few years, I would say. I think I gotta go Under the Skin, though. If you haven't seen Under the Skin, I highly recommend it. It's sci-fi horror, and it's effectively disturbing. Jonathan Glazer is a great, underrated filmmaker, and really good movie. Total Recall versus Arrival. I think I'm going to go Arrival, another one of the best of recent years. I'm going to go Arrival with this one, really good. Okay, back to the other side. We are now in the semifinals, I think. The Thing versus The Matrix. The Thing was a flop when it came out versus The Matrix being an instant big hit and super influential. Influence probably should factor into this a little bit. I do think The Thing was influential despite being a flop. I think it became influential regardless. If we're talking my favorite, I gotta go The Thing, like easily. The first Matrix though, this is something that Tarantino said when he was hosting his Sky Movies thing, and I agree with him on this, is that the Matrix sequels kind of hurt the first Matrix, like 2 and 3, and now the fourth one, Resurrections, right? They kind of hurt the mythology of the first movie a little bit. It's hard to not think of the ways that the sequels damage. I want to look at the first movie as a standalone thing, but the sequels do kind of hurt it. I think I'm going The Thing. That might be an upset too. But hey, I'm not here to validate your own opinions. That's not what I'm doing here. Okay, Children of Men versus Alien. For as great as Children of Men is, I think its run might come to an end here. Because my immediate gut reaction is that Alien is the better sci-fi movie. And I'm going to go Alien with it. I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm just going to go Alien. Bang. Moving on. World's End vs. Terminator 2. No fucking contest. The World's End was lucky to get this far. Extremely lucky to get this far. The bracket really shook out in the World's End's favor to make it this far. Terminator 2 moves on. Okay. Terminator 1 would beat the World's End 2, by the way, also very easily. Under the Skin versus Arrival. This one is, again, tough. I would say this is about as tough as Under the Skin versus Ex Machina. I mean, I'm going to go Under the Skin again. Ex Machina versus Arrival would be really tough. That would be a tougher matchup than either of them against Under the Skin, I would say. These last matchups are fucking strong as shit. Okay, The Thing versus Alien, really tough. Both horror. I guess my horror fandom is showing that I'm a big horror fan. I'm a bigger fan of horror than I am of sci-fi. That is certainly coloring the bracket a bit, both in these two and in Under the Skin. So there's definitely a little bit of bias in here. I try to cancel out some of my bias, but everyone is biased by nature. It's impossible to cancel out 100% of your bias ever. I'm going to go Alien with these two. That feels right to me out of these two. Terminator 2 versus Under the Skin. Again, I'm feeling Under the Skin. I got to go with my horror impulse here. I don't know. Maybe I should try to... Because Under the Skin is more niche. It's not for as many people. Does that matter if we're talking best sci-fi ever made? Maybe it does. Maybe Under the Skin shouldn't make it to the finals for that reason. I think so. I think I'm going to go against my personal bias here. And I think if we're talking best sci-fi ever made, Terminator 2 probably does deserve to be in the final matchup more than Under the Skin does, generally speaking. My favorite of the two is Under the Skin. But I think I gotta go Terminator 2. That's me trying to be as objective as possible. And the final pairing, this is a solid final pairing, I would say. Alien versus Terminator 2. Honestly, I'm leaning real heavily right off the bat toward Alien. It's gotta be Alien. And it would be the same with Alien versus Under the Skin. It's Alien. You know what? I hadn't thought about it beforehand, but it feels right to me calling Alien the best sci-fi movie ever made. It's one of the best horror movies ever made, and it is the official 2022 Brickwall Pictures best science fiction film ever made, Ridley Scott's Alien, written by Dan O'Bannon. Check out my other movie elimination bracketed tournaments. You'll find a playlist to them down in the description and on the end screen here. Subscribe to Brickwall Pictures, check out more of my stuff. I'll see you next time. So long.